Okay guys, welcome back for part 2 of my Cabinet Vision versus Mozaik comparison. If you haven't seen the first video, we talked a little bit about the front end, things like drawing walls, putting cabinets on the walls, and more of the things you would do while you're in the job. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll link to it in the description, you can go check it out. In this video, we're going to be doing more of the back end things like setting up your constructions, setting up doors, and it's kind of the exciting stuff for me. So I'm not going to talk a lot before we go into it. We'll summarize it at the end, but with that, I'm going to go right into showing you my comparison. Okay, let's look at the part setup in Cabinet Vision. So from the main screen of Cabinet Vision, I'll just click on Part. And here we're going to see all the pre-configured options that Cabinet Vision comes with by default. So for example, inside of assembly, this is kind of the normal parts of a cabinet. So like if I look at the case interior options, I'm going to see unfinished ends, decks, shelves, adjustable shelves, and exposed are things like finished ends. And the nice thing about Cabinet Vision is you can actually define your own part types. So where this is nice is if you have a part that isn't normally what people consider a normal cabinet part, you can define that part and you can assign a unique material to it. So Cabinet Vision does a nice job of allowing the user to define it. Now I will say most shops that I've seen pretty much just use the standard options. It's when you get into those custom parts is when being able to define the new parts really comes in handy. Okay, now let's look at part setup in Mozaik. So from any screen I can go to Libraries and Parts, and I'm going to see a list of all the parts available in Mozaik. So just like in Cabinet Vision, I'm going to see top, bottom, unfinished end, shelf, divider, all those normal parts you would think of when you're adding a cabinet. Now in Mozaik you can't add new part types. Doesn't mean you can't do custom stuff, you just can't define your own part types. And like I said, for most shops this is not a huge deal, but if you are looking to do some special pieces and full flexibility, that may limit you a little bit on not being able to define your own part names. Next, let's look at how materials are added in Cabinet Vision. So from the main screen, I'm going to click the material icon. And Cabinet Vision lumps a lot of different things into what they call materials. You know, it's not just solid stock or plywood, but they also, hinge plates, hinges, drawer guides, and, even custom materials that you can add. So there's a lot of different things aside from just the normal wood materials that you would think of. But for this example, I'm just going to go plywood, and I'll just look at some cherry plywood. So I have 3 different sizes here, and the first tab is just some basic material costing information. I can decide if it has CNC, so when it's nesting on the sheet, will it be able to flip or not. I can set up the size. And the thing I really like about Cabinet Vision is you can assign front and back textures. And this is really helpful for the engineer because it allows them to easily see issues or see problems, especially when they're doing a more custom piece. Just makes it easy to be able to see which side is the back side and so on. Now, once you have materials added, Cabinet Vision utilizes material schedules to apply those to the parts. So, for example here, I'm looking at a cherry material schedule. And all the different part types that are set up are going to show up here. So if I minimize here, everything is part of the assembly group. And if I want to look at the interior parts, I would just go into that specific thing. And then everything works really well as far as just drag and drop, really simple to use. If I want to apply a part, if I want to apply a material to a part, I just drag it over and let loose of it. Now the nice thing you can do, if I want to replace all the 1/2-inch one-sided UV plywoods, because it's on the parent, like the whole interior group, I can quickly just change all of these to cherry and it'll change everything below. So it can be time consuming and it's a little tedious, but there is some nice shortcuts, especially if you set these up correctly. So that's how you add materials and assign materials in Cabinet Vision. Now let's look at how to add materials in Mozaik. So from any screen, I'm going to go to the Libraries and go to Materials. And so Mozaik thinks more in terms of actual materials. You know, you're going to see like drawer guides and hinge plates more in a specialized area, which I like that because when I'm thinking of materials, I'm thinking of plywoods, board stock, edge banding. So I kind of like that aspect of it. Now the actual adding material is pretty straightforward. You do the name, you do the size, you know, you can specify some cost again, just like in Cabinet Vision, and you can do grain and two-sided. You can also assign a texture, but from what I've seen, this doesn't work quite as well as Cabinet Vision's front and back sided texture, but it does help you to be able to identify it, at least what the sheet overall is. Now, once you have your materials set up, if you go to Libraries and Material Templates, now this is called Material Schedules in Cabinet Vision, and I think this material template is just a little bit more clunky than Cabinet Vision's. I found myself kind of struggling to easily figure out how to set these up quickly, because like I have to highlight the part, and then I have to pick my different material, and then it'll change it just for that one. So you know, you can easily accomplish what you need to, but you know, it's just not quite as intuitive as Cabinet Vision's interface. Okay, let's look at adding doors in Cabinet Vision. So I'm going to click on the door icon, and I'm going to go ahead and click New Door. Now there's a lot of different types we could cover. For this example, I'm just going to do a normal 5-piece door. You know, you can do MDF routed doors, you can do slab doors, and you know, there's tons of capabilities both in Mozaik and Cabinet Vision. So I'll just call it test, and I'll make it a multi-piece door, and we'll say it's a flat panel. So that adds my door, and then I'll just double click it to edit it. And so a couple things we can do. First of all, obviously we can section it. You know, we can say that the bottom rail is going to be 5 for some reason. Another thing we can do is the profiles. So I can just say, okay, I want these outside edges to work on this door. And I can do the same for the other types of edges. And the materials, again, I just move over what I want to work. And then the last thing that's really nice in Cabinet Vision is this door association. So say you want to switch to a double panel when it goes over 48 tall. So I could just enter those restrictions, and then I could switch to that door. And so that's a really powerful way, like being able to switch between those double panel doors, and even some drawer fronts, you know, switching from a 5-piece to a slab because the panel gets too small. You just really have a lot of capability with this door association. And so that's kind of a basic overview of the door editor. You can also, you know, the thumbnails generate very nicely. You can also organize them in your own folders. And that's a quick summary of Cabinet Vision's door editor. Okay, now let's add some doors in Mozaik. So I'm going to go to Libraries and Doors. And I'm going to switch to the Traditional tab and click Add, and I'll just add a test door, again like I did in Cabinet Vision. And then I can easily change the default rail, so if I want to do that 5-inch bottom rail like I did in Cabinet Vision, I can. I can click on the panel and edit the panel type, and you know, I can just quickly make those adjustments that I need as far as the defaults on a door. And then instead of door associations, Mozaik utilizes this min and max and replacement door option, which in most cases you're able to accomplish what you need. It doesn't quite have the different levels available like Cabinet Vision's door associations, but you know, for most things you're able to accomplish what you need with these 4 options. Okay, now we're going to look at construction methods, and this is going to be where the biggest differences lie between Cabinet Vision and Mozaik. And I'm not going to be able to cover this in too much detail because that would get very lengthy, but I do want to give you an overview of just kind of how they work between the two, because they both kind of have their different way of doing things. So Cabinet Vision uses a combination of assembly construction methods and connection. So the connection manager is new in version 12, and this really gives you a lot more freedom to be able to edit for your different dados and connectors and you know, the different types of ways you join parts together. So I'm going to go to connections, and I'm just going to say new, and I'm going to add a dado called Myron dado so we can easily find it later. And again, we'd pick our different connection types. I'll just leave it on dado. And I'm just going to leave it at stop dado, and we're going to say it's 1/4 inch deep. And we'll just ignore the oversizes, and we're finished. So now I have my dado set up. So I'm going to go to the assembly method. Now, I have all my different construction methods, which I'm just going to work on 1/2 inch overlay. And there's several different categories here. We have face frame, interior, exterior, operations, and finally connection. So the connection option, we just created a connection called dado. So let's say I wanted to make my bottom or my deck dado into the unfinished end. Well, I would just go find the bottom or the deck. And when I'm inside of the connection parent group, this is dealing simply with connections. So now I can just scroll through this list of questions until I find unfinished end. And then I can just choose Myron dado that I created. Here we go. And that would know how to size the part. It would know to apply a dado in the unfinished end, and everything just takes care of itself. So that's what the connections do. It just deals with, it does affect the sizing of the part, because if you add a dado, obviously the part gets bigger, but it simply deals with how those parts connect into other available parts. Now these top 4 sections are more, part level options. So for example, let me go to that same bottom option, but not in the connections. So I'm going to go to deck, and it's going to ask me questions about banding. Do I want to put exterior banding or interior banding? I can say which way the grain runs, and how far the bottom is below the bottom rail, and just some basic questions about that specific part. Again, you're not going to get into any what does this part butt into, any types of those questions. That will all be done inside of the connection manager. So the whole schema is a little bit hard to wrap your mind around, but once you understand, and you start setting up your connections and you start applying them to your construction methods, you really have no limit to what you're able to do. You could put a blind dado over here, you could put a no dado on your top, and just endless different things you can do. So that's a high level overview of how construction is handled in Cabinet Vision. And again, we could go way more in depth, because it doesn't just stop at the construction methods. You're able to modify it inside the job, and also using UCSs. But that's a quick look at the main construction editor in Cabinet Vision. Okay, let's look at adding construction methods in Mozaik. Now, this was a little bit difficult for me when I first started in Mozaik, because I used Cabinet Vision for many years before trying Mozaik for the first time. And so I had a little bit of a hard time wrapping my mind around the whole parameters and custom parameters. But then once you kind of understand how it's laid out, you find that it is pretty flexible. And I think that's true with most any software you use. It's only as good as you know it, and you're going to find little quirks and little workarounds for your software the better you get at it. So to set up our construction method, I'm going to go to products, and for each of my catalogs, I have a different set of job parameters or construction parameters. And so if I click that, I'm going to see all the options for that. And so we can see the different categories that are available to edit. So for example, in the Cabinet Vision example, I added a dado from the deck into the ends. So here, just a very simple parameter-based thing. If I want a 1/4 inch dado, I put 1/4 inch in this parameter. So it's very easy to do as long as they have a question for it. Now I found when they didn't have a question for it, it was a little more tedious to get what I wanted. But for the most part, these guys are very familiar with it, and they're going to have parameters and options for most of the values that you're going to be doing. And then the nice thing also is you're able to edit these on a cabinet by cabinet basis. So all this is really is setting defaults for how you build your cabinets. So that's a quick overview of how Mozaik handles the construction methods compared to Cabinet Vision. Okay, now let's look at adding reports in Cabinet Vision. So when I'm inside a job, I'm going to go to the Reports tab, and I'm going to go to Report Center. Now, I only have this test group, and I don't have any reports saved, but you can easily add your default reports there, so you don't have to go into Setup Reports every time. But for this example, I'm going to go into Setup Reports, and you can see all of the stock and all of the reports that you've been working on in this list. So for example, a door style and rail cut list, I can just preview that and I can see exactly how it's going to look. And the really nice thing is, let's just say I want to make a copy of this, and I'll just add my name at the end. And then what I'm able to do is I can go to the report designer and I can change the fonts, the layouts, and kind of the visual stuff from this end. But then if I want to pull in other data, like being able to tie different parts together and display multiple different tables, this gets really technical, and the average guy making cabinets is not going to be able to do this, but having the capability for someone to do it within your system is really nice, because reporting is a big part of this, especially for a medium-sized shop. But for example, like I can look at the parts data that it's pulling in now, and I can edit the SQL statement. So right now it's selecting all the parts where the part subclass is 12, which without the documentation that's going to mean nothing to you. But point being, you can easily edit the data you're pulling in, you can change how it looks visually, and you can make any sort of report you want with a little bit of time invested. You can make labels, you can make door order sheets, you can, the list is endless. Then also on the reporting side, we have assembly sheets. And the assembly sheets, they did a good job of making this easy to edit, which I'm going to actually I need to go to the Drawings tab. So let me close out here, go to Drawings, Drawings Library, and hit the drop down for assembly sheets. Now here's where I can edit this. And now they did a good job of making this easy to understand. It just uses text variables to be able to pull in the data you need, and then you can use a table for your part data. So it's pretty easy for someone to come in and just change the layout. Say I want 2 images here and I want to put some different information down here. That's pretty simple for most anyone to be able to do. So that's a look at the reports in Cabinet Vision. As you can see, lots and lots of customization available, but it's difficult without a highly trained user to be able to fully utilize the options they have. Okay, now let's look at the reports in Mozaik. So when I'm inside a job, if I go to the very last tab for a cut list, I can see all the parts here, or I can filter for the specific parts I need. So you're not going to find near the customization as what was available in Cabinet Vision, but they do a good job of providing everything you need just at a quick find. And since there's no extremely difficult customization, anyone can do it. So I don't think this is a major deal that they don't have near the customization, because especially for the small to middle size shop, you don't have quite the reporting needs that a middle to large size shop would. But you're able to easily, if you're willing to adapt to their layouts, you're able to easily, create your door order and your drawer. You're still able to get the reports that you need. Okay, next let's look at object intelligence. And object intelligence is done on a cabinet by cabinet level. It's not done like a construction method would be. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to go inside this cabinet, and I'm going to go to the face view, and I'm going to add a new part. This part is not going to know anything of how it's built. So I'm just going to make it a board, and we're not going to worry about the default things. We're just going to get it added. Okay, so I have this part. You can see it in the 3D view. What object intelligence is the ability to tell this part to be smart, basically, to resize and be parametric. So in Cabinet Vision, I can click on the length of this and click the little 3 dots and switch it from a static value to an equation. And there's lots of variables that you can use in Cabinet Vision. For example, if I want to make this match the cabinet height, I'll just do cab.dy. dy is the height, And if I test it, it returns that the cabinet is 34.5. So just very quickly I can tie that to the object. And so now if I go back and I make my cabinet 60 inches tall, that part's going to go with it. And so just that very quick example right there should really open your eyes to the potential with something like this, being able to tell parts to resize or not resize based on what other parts are doing. And that's kind of the essence of object intelligence. To do object intelligence in Mozaik, again, it's done on a cabinet by cabinet level. And just to show a quick example, if I go to the parts tab, and let's say I want to make this nailer, the length of the cabinet width for whatever reason. I'll just go to the width, and I can type whatever variable I want. And if I click the little question mark here, they're very good about giving the descriptions of what things are. So like, for example, the cabinet width is just W. So if I put a W in here and test it, I can see that result shows up like that. So both Cabinet Vision and Mozaik have very clever ways of making parts feel smart and making them parametric to when the cabinet is resizing. And keep in mind, all the normal parts of a cabinet are going to be parametric automatically. It's just when you're adding new parts and parts that don't know where they belong, you need to make them parametric if you want to be able to reuse them. So both Cabinet Vision and Mozaik do address the ability to make things parametric. Okay, now let's talk about customization. So I think Cabinet Vision is going to very clearly win this one due to the ability to create what they call UCSs, or user-created standards. And again, this is a very, very deep topic, but I'm going to give you just a very quick sample because I think a sample is the best way for you to kind of start thinking, oh, okay, that's how that's done. So let's go to UCSs, and let's create a new one. And it's going to bring up this wizard to try to help me format some of my UCS code, which I'm just going to ignore that and hit finish. And I'm going to go right to the code editor, and I'll just erase what they have. So again, I'm not going to go much into the syntax. I'm just going to give you a quick example so you can kind of wrap your minds around what it could do. So one part of every UCS is the for each line. We're telling it is this allowed to work on, and this is working on the cabinet objects. You could also work on individual parts like a bottom or a left end, but in this case we're working on the cabinet as a whole. So I'm going to first of all create an attribute, and so I'm just going to add that little comment explaining what I'm doing, and then I'm going to write the code that actually creates this attribute. So just bear with me, and it's okay if you're not following. When I finish this example, you're gonna kind of see the capability. So I'm gonna say if no toe equals null, then, so what this is, this little name here is just a name I just made up. I'm gonna say if that parameter name doesn't exist, then I'm gonna create it, and I'm gonna say it's a Boolean, which is a true or false. And it's going to be set to false by default. Then I have to say, okay, is it going to show up on the sidebar or is it going to be hidden? And if I want it to show up, I'm going to say the style is 1. And then I'm going to give it a name so I can easily identify it. So I'm going to say remove toe. And then we'll end that if statement. So I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to show you what we just did. And this is what we call an attribute. So now when I pull a cabinet out, you're going to see that parameter just created, and it's a true and false. So you can see I can toggle it back and forth, but there's no action tied to this. It's just an attribute by itself. It's not worth anything. Now let's assign a simple task to this. So now I can say if that parameter I just created equals 1, which means set to true, Then, if that's the case, if somebody goes in and checks that little sidebar attribute, then I want to set the toe kick height to 0. Now, I know that the system parameter for toe kick height is toe h, so I can just set that to 0 and in my if statement. So now we've made an actionable thing to where if I click remove toe, it's going to do exactly that. And so think of all the ways that you can use those if statements and then apply actions to them and be able to add attributes. And you know, right now, even if I pull a wall cabinet in, that parameter is going to show up. But I could just add a simple if statement at the top of this to say, you know, if it's a base cabinet or a tall cabinet, then add this parameter. So again, I don't want to go too far into details, but I felt like an example was the easiest way to explain this. And I'm telling you, you can get totally wild with UCSs. The shop I worked at, we had almost 200 UCSs. Some of them were just kind of fixing little minor details like moving parts around because there was something quirky in the construction. Some of them were adding custom parts. Some of them, you know, it's endless options. But again, you know, there's a pretty steep learning curve to be able to utilize it fully, but you know, you really can't hold a candle to a full programming capability within your software. Okay, so customization in Mozaik. Now, we don't have near the level of customization available that we do in Cabinet Vision as far as creating these rules and standards for how your cabinets are built. Now, it doesn't mean, you know, you aren't able to accomplish what you need to, you know, inside of a cabinet. It's just, it's harder to set up these rules and define the workflows and the automations like you can in Cabinet Vision. So let me show you a little bit how one way that Mozaik allows customization. So I'm going to go to Edit and Job Parameters, and we can add these custom parameters. And so this enables us to be able to add parts, operations, or modify them. And so similar to our if statements in a UCS, you know, I can say, okay, is this a base cabinet? You know, is it a certain name? And you know, you can, this is kind of your if statements. And then you just determine what happens. You know, do I want to edit the top? You know, maybe I want to make it smaller by, you know, I want to adjust it by a 1/4 inch. So you can kind of set up these little automations that happen as a whole based on the conditions you set. You just don't have the full freedom of a programming language like you do in Cabinet Vision. But from what I've seen, you know, you're able to, like, there's a couple of quirks in, like, if you can't find a parameter to adjust what you need as far as a construction level, you can set up one of these custom parameters and be able to accomplish what you need in Mozaik. So, like I said, customization is not always, you know, it's not always better to be able to do more, because sometimes it can become so overwhelming that it's just, you're wasting time trying to do simple things. So again, it just depends on your needs, but on an individual level, you know, you can definitely go in and be able to do what you need. Cabinet Vision is just going to have a lot more flexibility with your conditions, with your if statements, with your automations, and just setting up those workflows to make you efficient. But it all comes at a cost. Okay, so that concludes our Cabinet Vision versus Mozaik comparison. I hope these last 2 videos have better equipped you to be able to understand the differences between the two and help you to be able to make a decision on, you know, do you want to buy one of these or do you want to switch to one of these from something else from what you're using. And, you know, I wish I could just say Cabinet Vision is better or Mozaik is better, but if we've learned anything from these 2 comparison videos, it's that Mozaik is better in some ways and Cabinet Vision is better in some ways. And it just comes down to each shop's needs. So I very much enjoyed putting the video together. I hope it was helpful for you guys. Feel free to leave some comments if you have any other questions or some feedback to provide. So thanks for watching.